Good morning. Today we are going to discuss about the basics of Foundry. The image describes about the manufacturing process. That means it is a conversion of the raw material into the finished product by removing the unwanted materials. This image describes about the casting process. It's one of the example of sand casting. Now we are going to discuss about what is the manufacturing process. Manufacturing can be defined as the process of converting raw materials into an usable form of products. The major process involved in manufacturing process are: the first one is the product design, and the next step is the raw material selection, and the next step is the sequence of operations through which the product will be manufactured. This is one of the small example to better understand the casting basics of foundry purpose. Here we will discuss about the formation of a jewelry. In that, the golden metal is first melted and then it is poured into the mold cavity, and then the desired shape is attained. Now we are going to discuss about the casting. The process of metal casting involves pouring of molten metal into the mold cavity, which is a cavity formed in some molding materials such as sand. The mold cavity exactly resembles in shape and size with the product to be made. After pouring the molten metal, it is allowed to freeze there, taking up the shape of the mold cavity, and the cavity is thus called the cast, and the process is called as casting. This is the basic diagram of the casting process. This is the pouring basin, and this is the sprue, this is the runner, this is the riser. Here it is the mold where the final shape attains. This is the core, and this is the flask, and this is a cope box. The upper portion of the flask is the cope box. The lower portion of the flask is the drag box. The molten metal is poured into the pouring basin, and the molten metal runs through the sprue, and then it is runs through the runner, and then finally it attains the mold cavity. The function of the riser is to after the solidification process, there can be a light change in the shape of the final part. For that, the metal which is present in the riser fills the mold cavity. We will discuss one by one in detail. First one is the flask. The molding flask is one which holds the sand mold intact. Depending on the position of the flask in the mold structure, it is referred as the drag box, or else it can be referred as the cope box. It is generally made up of wood for temporary use of the metal for long-term use. The second important part is drag. It is a lower molding flask. And the next important part is cope box. It is the upper molding flask. The next one is cheek, intermediate molding flask used in 3-piece molding. And the next one is potting line. This is the dividing line between the two molding flasks that makes up the sand mold. Next important part is core. It is used for making hollow cavities in the castings. If you want to make a hollow cavity or hole-like structure in the casting part, the core is used. Next part is the pouring basin. It is a small funnel-shaped cavity at the top of the mold into which the molten metal is poured. Next, sprue, the passage through which the molten metal from the pouring basin reaches the cavity. Next one is the runner, the passageways in the potting plane through which molten metal flow is regulated before they reach the mold cavity. Next important part is the gate, the actual entry point through which molten metal enters the mold cavity. And the next part is the chaplet. Chaplets are used to support core inside the mold cavity to take care of its own weight and overcome the metallostatic forces. Next part is chill. As the name determines, the chills are metallic objects which are placed in the molds to increase the rate of cooling of castings to provide uniform or desired cooling rate. The next important part in the casting or foundry is riser. It is the reservoir of molten metal provided in the casting so that hot metal can flow back into the mold cavity where there is a reduction in volume of metal due to solidification. The last part which is present in the casting is core print. An impression in the form of the recess is made in the mold with the help of the projection, suitably placed on the pattern for supporting the cores in the mold cavity. This projection is known as core print. Thank you. In next class, we are going to discuss about what are all the steps which is present in the casting process. Thank you.